Thanks for being here. My name is Satish Tallapaka. Quick 30-second intro about me, about the session. I'm a Googler. I work at Google. I also call myself a Yogler. We have a big yoga group at Google. I'm part of the Yogler leadership team. And I'm also Stanford lead Alum synthesizers. Started before pandemic 2020, right? So this topic, defining awareness, is a pretty profound topic, and this is my kind of humble attempt at trying to make sure I can explain and see how we can actually become aware truly in next 1 hour. I don't promise we all become enlightened in next 1 hour and become Buddhas, no. But at least this gives us some kind of thinking through, right? What's going on, right? What is really this awareness? What is this self? And how can we get that inner peace we talk about, right? So all of those things is what this is. And this is very important right now in this connected world, right? So we have so much going on constantly. And it's very important for us to ground ourselves and really think and perceive things as they are versus how we kind of want them to be. And that's basically how we're going to look at this one. So with that, let's get started. So this is like a key overarching statement here to make here is the true awareness is true happiness. So one thing which we all want, we all seek is happiness, right? So anything we are doing at the end of the day, why are we doing something? The happiness comes into the play. But happiness is sometimes subjective, right? But awareness is universal. So once you're aware of what's happening, once you're aware of our inner selves, so that happiness is not momentary, that stays with us forever. And some of these experiences which I had, and I thought I'd share with the team, to everyone. Right? So on this session. And as we go through the slides and as we talk, anytime, please raise your hand. Happy to answer questions. I want this one to be interactive. It's a small group, so just any question. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I'm wondering about this statement. If you can elaborate, maybe even more, because awareness, I understand that you can also kind of discover some challenges or sadness. Why do you say that it's ultimately like true awareness is a true happiness? Why do you say that it leads to happiness?
Absolutely. Great question. Thank you for that. So I'll give a brief answer. As we go through the slides, we'll get to the actual things. So when we talk about awareness, we are going beyond a simple physical presence. Awareness of our inner selves. Who are we really, right? So we question ourselves, who are we? Right? So we say, oh, this body, is that you? If the body is yours, but who are you inside the body? So that's the question. When you really answer that question, that's where you really start seeing that happens coming through you. And that's the discovery we're going to do this through this presentation today.
Thank you.
Sure. So let's look at the journey of the awareness, the flow of awareness, right? When we look at an object, it starts with the perception, and the perception converts into sensation and then into a feeling. So this just happens as we actually looking at anything, right? Any perceiving or any action we take. After that, what happens is the mind comes into the play, your thoughts and emotions. There is a big lens here. We're going to put that lens of our mind, our thoughts, emotions, our memory, our ego, and then we look at it in a very different way, because whatever was looked at, we have actually our own experiences on top of it. And we see it, our awareness is not true to that sense. It is really clouded. And this happens to every one of us. Right? So when you look at the journey of awareness to actually have a truly a communal awareness, that enlightenment we talk about, is when you actually subdue your mind. So everything is, because the mind is very, very, very powerful, right? So as we see, we have to use mind to do things, but also mind acts in a way that it kind of skews things, because it again the lens is our memories. So it happens to anything, right? You might be working with, if you're a child and you're talking to a kid, thinking will be very different, because when we talk to a child and then the kid comes back to an answer, we put our memory a lens there and an answer versus looking really through in their perspective. So when we subdue our mind, you really start seeing things in the way they are supposed to be. And it's very simple statement, say subdue your mind, but it's the most difficult thing to do, right? So same question. Is it possible to subdue the mind? I really like this statement here, right? Enlightenment cannot blossom in a body clogged with toxins. So when you want to subdue your mind, we have a connectedness here, right? We have our body and the mind, the breath. So the whole body, breath, mind complex has to work together. But how can it happen, right? There are two things here. One is the physical toxicity, right? The toxins which are actually byproducts of the food we take. So stale food, spoiled, undigested. So what happens when I say stale, it's not like we are eating a stale food, but when you're actually pulling something from a freezer and eating, it is stale. It is put in the freezer, that's okay, but still it's a stale food. So if you really look at it fills your stomach, but that doesn't have, if you look at I'm going to use some Sanskrit terms, please, I can explain in English. It doesn't have the prana, it doesn't have the life in it. You're taking it, that's fine, it will fill up our stomach and your brain will get a message saying it is there, but it is basically stale. A lot of these things actually causes the physical toxicity. And if the physical toxicity builds over the period of the time, it actually causes problems, even just physically, muscles and everywhere the toxins go and sit there. And that actually clogs the mind. When you're irritated, right, the mind is clogged. So it's a very, very clear connection over there. And the other one is the emotional or mental toxicity. The ama is the word in Sanskrit for the toxicity. The negative emotions and the thoughts. So that's very difficult thing. So negative emotions happen all the time because of whatever reason, right? So it does happen to us. But holding them, continuously thinking about them actually causes this toxicity inside us. A combination of both sides, the physical and the emotional toxicity, really kind of blocks our vision. So when you go and do things, because there is one thing here, right? So we perform in our office, work and everything. There is we draw a line and do all those things. But when you come out of it, still there's things in our head which stays there. And that's very important to really realize. Why I'm saying all these things is this is just all the root causes. Once you have an awareness of these things can happen within us, so we can go and correct it. Right? That's the idea, is to really know what's happening here. So just kind of remedies, right? So there's a lot of Sanskrit. I'll read it and then, yeah, go ahead.
When we in lead, right, there's a lot of courses where we build the leadership to power, show the power and all. So how can you do it in the day and then subdue your mind by the evening?
So you can build leadership with the power. It can still be empathetic, still be compassionate. All of those things still make your mind. The one word here I'll read the prasanna. So that means the happy, right? You can still be a happy leader. It doesn't mean that you're saying yes to everything or anything, but when you put your perspective, you can still use the same lens for that. So what we do for our regular day-to-day things, you can still be ethically right. And you can see, I believe in a leader who doesn't need to say somebody else to do something, right? They do it for the leader because that person cares. I think in my view, the caring is the best leadership. You can command somebody to do something, they might do temporarily, and they're actually, their resume is on LinkedIn next moment, right? So we don't want that. So that's kind of policy.
But don't they say you don't have to command them to do something, but you, especially as a female leader, you have to command presence. No matter how much you care as a woman, they don't want to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can command,
or at least that's been my experience, is commanding that airtime and presence. You don't have to command what they have to do, but when you're caring as a female leader, see it as a weakness, in my opinion, or my experience.
Yeah. I'll cover that in one of the slides in next few slides. Hold the thought, and then we can discuss. Okay, definitely. So on this one, on the removing the physical toxicities, so it talks about, this is a very simple 4 lines, but it actually packs the entire human healthcare in there. It says samadosha, samadhatu, samagnischa, malakriyaha, prasannatma, indriya manaha, swastha, itya bhidiyate. I mean, one of the words here, everything says sama, sama, sama. That means equilibrium. Anything we do has to be in equilibrium. So one of the things it says samadhatu. So that basically, there are 2 meanings to it. One is about our body, the muscles, the body, the blood, and everything. And also the elements, the fire, water, and earth. We are made of these elements, and those elements have to be in equilibrium. I don't know if anybody saw the Avatar, not the movie, the cartoon actually, on Nickelodeon, if you have kids or anything. That's my favorite one. It talks about a fire nation going and invading other nations, and then the whole explodes, right? So an avatar comes and fixes everything. That's us basically in this sense. We need to, anything we eat, really make sure like those elements somehow are present. And if you see any of the Eastern philosophy books, Ayurveda or even Chinese medicine talks about these things very, very clearly. These elements has to be in your food so that it is actually balances, and it in turn balances your mind. The prasanna atma indriya manaha, they talk about prasanna means happiness. The atma is inner self, indriya is your organs, and then the mana is the mind. So it's so beautifully written here, talking about inner self as a part of your health. The health is not just outside, it's also inside. And that's where, I mean, you can actually equate that to your mental health of us, right? So a lot of us might be physically great, but mentally there's something going on. And really kind of realizing that you will be in this state of happy and content when all these things come in a nice way. So this is kind of my guiding principle. When I look at what I should eat, whatever diet you want to follow, go ahead, right? I'm not saying this way, eat this or you don't eat that. Just a very simply, right? Thinking about the balance. The balancing here, beautifully written, and then they talk about the molecular, the digestion and everything. So very simple statement, but very profound.
Can you explain Samadosha?
Samadosha, there are 3. I mean, again, I'm not going to full Ayurvedic class, but I'm a Googler working on AI, but still I know these things a little bit. So, so it is we have Vata, Pitta, Kapha, 3 doshas, which actually are in the human body, which impact different types of things, right? So each one of them impact the dhatus, the fire and the water element and the earth element. For instance, if the earth element is more, you have like sluggishness, people will have all those problems. So you need to make sure those 3 doshas, in turn, the dhatus are in alignment. So that's basically what it means.
So take a food that can take care of the 3 doshas or three different elements.
Yes. So that's why when you take any food which is stale, in a way, it actually increases the problems, right, in the digestive system, the gut problems, all of those things happen.
And take the refrigerator.
I mean, refrigerator versus freezer, so you can decide where you want to put your money. So it's, again, I think the human body is not a machine. I think when we treat it as a machine, that's where the problem comes. So that's about the physical health. Now we'll talk about the mental health. So the biggest problem, again, the mind is, as I said, subduing mind is really, really difficult one. And this, the mind is compared to the monkey. You might have seen so many lectures or talks about the monkey mind and things like that. But this poem, I don't know when it was written, maybe some centuries back. It's beautifully illustrates in a way, in a funny way, like the mind compared to the monkey. I'll read the Sanskrit one and explain in English. It says, Markatasya surapanam madhya vrichika damshanam tanmadhyo bhuta sancharo adbhava tadbhava bhavisyati. What it means is Markatasya. Markata means the monkey, surapanam. Here the mind is compared to a monkey which is drunk. So that's the first thing, right? The monkey is already jumping around and it's drunk, so you can think the state of it. On top of it, the second line says madhyo vrichika damshanam. That means this drunk monkey is now bitten by a scorpion. So the state of monkey is much more agitated now. And the third line says tanmadhyo bhuta sancharo. On top of it, there is a ghost which enters into the monkey. So a monkey which is drunk, right? On top of it, there's got a scorpion bitten, and then there's a ghost. So the state of the monkey is really, really, you can imagine, right? How it will be. And we are actually kind of in a way bombarded with so many things. We are doing our work, you see a message coming up on your phone, it could be from family, friends, something else. And there is a news feed coming from somewhere else. So you can just look at these things, these metaphors, and put into our continuity, you can map to different things. And so much happening constantly, right? And that's where we cannot subdue the mind, because so much information keep hitting us constantly. And that's basically, but with all these things, can you truly master your mind, right? That's the question. So, I mean, this is again one take of it, or what I would say, right? So this have been dealt in the past, not today. 3,000 years, 3,000 BC, 5,000 BC. That means the human race, though we evolved, we still stay humans. The problems existed then, the problem exists now in a different way. A lot of these things have been dealt in the past. So we look at the 5 of the Yoga Sutras and see how they relate to the mental health and how they actually promote the awareness. And then look at one story from Upanishad. Upanishad is this Vedic text, and how it actually talks about the inner self. And the Yoga Sutras, one thing that I want to bring up is yoga. How many of you do yoga?
Currently or?
Anytime. It's fine, doesn't matter. Great. I hope a lot of folks on the Zoom also do it. Right. So when we think about yoga, what does come to our mind?
How do I, when I think of yoga, I think of how do I shut down my mind? And the more I think of how do I shut down my mind, I can't shut down my mind. But going back to the yoga mat is when I find that I slowly learn to shut down my mind.
That's great. I hope the some Yoga Sutras we talk about will help in the context there. Yeah. And one thing is these Yoga Sutras, which are the aphorisms which were written like 3000 BC by sage Patanjali. I think they are the foundation for a multi-billion-dollar industry we have right now. So that is the actually vision statement. The 192, even one of them is a vision statement, which actually spawned such a big industry in the world, right? It's great. I think it is really good that so many people benefit from it. But I want to talk about it from the mental health angle today, right? So we look at the 5 Yoga Sutras, the aphorisms here, and see how they relate to what we're talking about today. So the first one, it says Yogasya Chitta Vritti Nirodhakaha. So we talked about subduing the mind. It says yoga is to remove the chitta vrittis. Chitta is equated to a mind. The mind is not one-dimensional. It has got multiple compartments. So the one is the manas, which is actually the perceiving sense. And then the next one is the ahankara, which says the ego, which actually asserts that this is for me, right? I am the one who has to take action for this. And then there is a buddhi, which is the intellect, which actually discriminates and makes a decision. When we talk about chitta, which is kind of roughly equated to the mind, you are looking at kind of subduing all these things. The vrittis is the waves, like a thought waves, right? So we have this huge ocean coming up. Think about our mind as this big ocean with so many waves coming up. Yoga is there to actually subdue this ocean, these waves. So that's why yoga is chitta vritti nirodha. This is the kind of the foundational statement of yoga. Why you do yoga, as you said, is to kind of bring ourselves in a calm state. So once we say that, okay, this is what I need to do. Now the question is how, right? And then what are the obstacles? For everything, there is something going on where it actually stops us from doing things. So we want to understand like what we can do about it. Before I go there, right? How? So one other aspect here for the awareness, I think for the beginning question you asked me, we have when we talk about our lives and then we look at only one aspect, mostly is our wakeful state. But half of our life is spent sleeping. Has anybody thought like, yes, that's also part of my thinking process. That's also where my mind works. That's also one of the things I need to take care, because any day we don't sleep well, the next day is like miserable, right? So that side of the house is very important. I'll go through the sutra before I kind of explain that why it is, because our wakeful state, where the gross body really works, and we have two states in the sleep. One is the dream sleep and the dreamless sleep, right? The dream sleep is called sapna avastha, and dreamless is the sushupta avastha. The reason I'm saying this is the wakeful state, all of our body organs are working, we're talking, the mind is in action. When you're actually in a dream sleep, your body is stopping, right? Your organs are not working, right? You might have a dream of like, maybe if you watched a Jackie Chan movie and you have a dream of like punching somebody, what will happen? No, or our hands and legs are just basically quiet. Nothing happens. Even if you're racing something, whatever is happening, right? Nothing happens, because only the mind is active, rest of the organs are calm at that time. And the next state, when actually is the dreamless sleep, when you really are resting and you wake up really happy, right? That state is when we are truly getting back into our own self. That's the idea here, is that state is when our mind rests. Only thing active at that time is the prana, which is the breath. You don't even remember what happened there, right? So you just, you go there and then you come back again next day morning when the thoughts come back to us. So that's where every time we sleep, when we get to that state, we are actually resting in ourselves, our true selves. The idea for meditation or anything which we do is to get there. That's the enlightenment. There's nothing else. So we get enlightened every day one time, right? Or like few moments in the night, and we come back again in the same state. So that's where it says tada drashtu swarupe avasthana. The awareness abides in its essential self. So we do that every day. And the idea is to really, can I get there in a more of a voluntary fashion? And that's the difficult part. And that's where it's really hard to subdue the mind. Because the mind gets subdued then. Why can't I do it every time? Whenever I need it, so that I have much more clearer vision. Right? So that's the kind of essence of this one. The why we do yoga is because of this. So yes, we can do that, but of course, every time there is some obstacle or other which actually prevents us from doing these things. So it says avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abnivesha, kleshaha. So kleshas are these obstacles we all have. The first one of them is the raga and dvesha, right? Raga is the attachment, and the dvesha is kind of aversion. So very strong statements we always make, right? I like this, I don't like this. But again, that statement is made from our memory. The like and dislike happens from that perspective. When you actually reduce these things quite a bit, even I think I was looking at there is a Coursera course about happiness. I was looking at it. So the people talk about, you will be happy buying a new car for like a few days. After that wanes up, because your raga, the attachment was there a little bit and then went away. Sometimes even the same car gets a scratch, you're so worried, right? So because we are attached to those things, but we know that they are temporary. So really kind of realizing these things exist within us is really important here. Once you realize, yes, this is, let's just start labeling this. Okay, I'm really not happy today because of something. What is this one? Is it because of my attachment or my aversion? Is it really needed? I think understanding that and questioning ourselves is very important. The other ones is this asmita and avidya, right? Asmita is like false identification of self that is not self. That means we say this body is a self. And that's the idea here we are trying to promulgate, is like self is universal. We talk about the universal self and what it is. And avidya is again false view of things, ignorant of like really what is happening. And the abnivesha is the fear of insecurity. One of the insecurities we all have. Again, this is a little profound, like death, right? So, but we know that's going to happen, but we are all insecure of that. And really, this insecurities constantly come to our mind for everything we think about it. Once you actually kind of say, okay, this is what it is, start labeling them and working towards that happy state of mind will happen. Because once all these things actually clog us quite a bit. One of the ways we avoid these things is looking at things in a different way. opposite way. Says Maitri Karuna Muditopekshana Sukha Dukkha Punyanam Vishyanam Bhavana Chitta Prasadam. So compassion, empathy, and joy. I mean, if anybody has dogs here, pets. Yeah. So you could relate, like you pet, if you just walk out of that room, come back, it is so happy. Right? You didn't do anything. You just momentarily, few minutes, you just walked out and came. It just comes wagging its tail. And that is the kind of the joy, like what here is called the word buddhita, the joy. It is sharing its joy in a very unselfish way to you. That joy in our professional lives, we can share in a different way, right? So when somebody gets a promotion, sometimes it's a human quality, why I did not get promoted, or maybe I'm jealous. So when you think about it, then the jealousy comes, the negative thought comes. Instead of that, let me just go congratulate with full heart. Just go, even he or she might be your rival for whatever it is. Just go do that, right? That is the mudita, that is the joy. We are actually enhancing that person's joy, and then you will be more joyful because of that. And Maitri, the friendship, right? Having friendships with having the friendly thought about anybody, it really kind of makes our minds much more clearer. The prasanna, the key word is the prasadam. Prasadam means the having that happy state of mind. And karuna is the compassion, showing that compassion. This is nothing earth-shattering. It's very simple, common sense. That's what is in the yoga. But the only thing is we forget. The idea here in this talk is to kind of remind ourselves like what these are and what we can do about it. Just identifying these things is very important. So this one more thing here is about everything together now, right? Bringing all of those things. So as you did yoga, you might have heard this word Ashtanga yoga. Ashtanga yoga doesn't mean that actually the exercises we do, right? That is basically kind of a trade name. But real Ashtanga is basically, there is a Yoga Sutra. It says Yama Niyama Asana Pranayama Pratyahara Dharana Dhyana Samadhiyo Ashtavangani. Ashta means 8. Anga means the limbs, the 8 limbs of yoga. Which actually, again, coming back to our mental health things here, start off with the yamas, which is our external disciplines. We need to observe these things. It talks about ahimsa, which is the non-violence. Non-violence in both the thought and the deed. And it talks about something called satya, truth, being truthful to ourselves. Right? And it says, one of the things it says is aparigraha, non-hoarding. When we start hoarding things, I think that's where the problem comes, right? So we just go to a shop and buy things for no reason and keep hoarding. The hoarding things is one thing, and hoarding things in our mind is another thing. I think the most dangerous thing is hoarding things in our mind. We can throw things from our closet, that's fine simply, but throwing things from this closet is the most difficult. And that's why having an awareness that there is something called aparigraha, that means the hoarding things, is important, that we will stop hoarding things. And the next one is called niyama. Like it says saucha santosha is a part of the niyama. Saucha means the purification, the purity of heart. Santosha is the contentment. Having really the content. Again, I'm not saying that don't be ambitious and don't do your thing, but having a contentment even there is very important. That's the difference, right? So we can have a blind ambition, or we can have a contentful ambition, where we're actually doing our thing, what we need to do it, you're doing your work and you're making it happen. At the same time, you are not brooding over it. So that's the thing. And then the other ones are, which are very famous, we do the asana, all of the asanas we do. Again, the asana is actually a meditation seat. So we are going to sit in a place and meditate. It's all about the mind. And then the pranayama, the breath control. So how many did pranayama here? Very good, everybody, awesome. So any experiences you could say, like when you do the pranayama, what happens? How do you feel?
There's more focus on the breath, and I feel more energized after.
Why do you think you feel energized? What happens?
I feel that I'm like energizing the breath itself. Like I'm focusing on that. I'm not focusing on anything else.
Yeah.
And I think energized for that.
Some of the negative energies would go away when you concentrate on breath and not think about anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you might have seen this, the mind, the body, and the breath connection, right? So you cannot control the mind straight up. So the controlling of the mind goes through the breath, right? The breath is the manifestation of your prana. Our life force is manifested as a breath. And so to control the mind, there's only way is to slowing down the breath. Right? When you slow down the breath, the mind slows down automatically. So when the pranayama is, you do that. So that's very important. Like even whenever we are stressed, people say take a deep breath. So that means you are actually elongating your breath. It really kind of slows down. And then the other ones, the other side of the wheel, the pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, is like withdrawing ourselves away from things, really kind of seeing the perspective. We cannot get there until we actually do these things. Right? If you have a lot of negative thoughts and you're not content with what you have, you do yoga, you go just do all these poses, but you come back out of that, again, your mind is gone. So that's very important for us to kind of recognize, even when you go to your yoga class. One thing that you can take away from this slide next time when you go to yoga class, think about all these things. So does this make sense? And does this help them?
But isn't this actually, wouldn't you say the wheel is accomplished from meditation and sometimes, and not necessarily, meditation is part of yoga, but just meditation. There was a time when I was focusing on meditation and I got to a point where I felt I was floating and caught myself and almost fell off my chair. But I've never been able to get back to that stage through the modern yoga classes, because I feel that wheel is accomplished in meditation more than the other part. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Like, I mean, I'll try to. So when you say that the meditation is basically, the meditation starts at the dharana, the concentration, then meditative absorption, a longer time you're in the same state, and samadhi, when actually you are truly aware of yourself. That second sutra I was talking about. So to get there, if there is a physical issue, you cannot sit that long. That's why you do the asanas. That's why you make sure your limbs are flexible. That's why you can stay there, sit straight. And then the breath to control the mind and the other social things which we talked about on the top. So yoga is about mental health. The physical thing is just a kind of a conduit for there. So once you get there, when you really kind of subdue your mind. So that state you might have got at the time, but you need to kind of keep doing it every time to get there. So with this one, we will do a simple, like a 5-minute reflection practice after this one, so if everybody's okay. So what it is as we got like high-level concepts, we'll just chant. I'll just say 3 words: Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Shanti means the peace. Peace for 3 times. Why you're saying 3 states of our existence. I was talking about wakeful state, the dreamless, and then the dreamful state. That's also one thing. Another thing is the Shanti is for 3 different dimensions of us. Us as this body. And the next level of Shanti, we are providing the energy to your next near and dear. And then third Shanti is for the universe. So we as this one connected universe, I wanted this 5 minutes of reflection. So the mantra is nothing, it says Om Shanti, 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 and then that's it. So we'll do this one together, and then we'll talk about the self existence everywhere from an Upanishadic story. So so it's a simple practice for a few minutes. So if you can just sit wherever you are. You can close your eyes or open your eyes, it's up to you. Take a nice deep breath. And exhale slowly. Then inhale. Exhale. One more time, deep inhalation. Slow down those thoughts. We'll do the practice now. So as I say Shanti, first one, just imagine your own body, giving that peace. The second one, to your near and dear. Third one, to the universe. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Shanti, Shanti. Observe yourself from a distance. Feel the consciousness within you. Say one more time. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Feel the stillness of your thoughts. Gently open your eyes whenever you're ready. So, this simple exercise, when we say this mantra, which is pretty universal, all we are saying peace to us, peace to our immediate neighbors, our family, and to the world, really demonstrates we are all connected together. We are different bodies, but the same consciousness, which is flowing across. So that understanding is very profound. Once we understand it's the same consciousness, our attitude towards things will be very different. It could be your pet, your spouse, your partner, whoever it is, or your colleague. Our mind changes constantly. Our reactions will be different. And that's one of the experiences which I kind of had, and I think differently from that moment onwards about the situation. So now that we understood a little bit about this one, when I'll tell one word before I go to the next one. So when we say this mantra, again, mind, there is actually Sanskrit says manana trayeti mantraha. Trayeta means, traya means liberation. Mantra is used to liberate your mind. Doesn't matter what it is. At the end of the day, again, the scholars come back to the mind, how we liberate it and how we see through it. So now let's talk about a story here from Upanishadic text. Upanishads are these Vedic texts. Again, they're supposed to be revealed texts from 3000 or 5000 years, 3000 BC, 5000 BC. Nobody knows the dates, right? But they talk about really the profound aspects of our existence as these beings. One of the, it's called Mahavakya, or the great word, says Tattvamasi. That means, I am that you are, thou art that. So what is that? I am that consciousness. I am that the force, right? If you see Star Wars, may the force be with you. What's the force? The force be with all of us now, right? Without the force or without that, you can give a name for it. You can call it Atma, Brahman, God, nature, whatever you want to give a name, but that exists. Right? Without that, we cannot function. That's the question, right? There is a Sanskrit says Sarvam Khalu Idam Brahman, right? Everything is this one consciousness. Then the question comes, there is a dialogue in this Chandogya Upanishad between a father and a son. The son asks, his name is Shvetaketu, the father's name is Aruni. So son asks, how can that be? Right, so same question for all of us. So he gives 5 examples and talks about like how this one consciousness flows across. So the first one he talks about is the honeybees. So the honeybees go and collect the honey from different plants. And then they go and come and make the honey. So when you look at the honey, can you separate it out, saying this particular particulate came from a specific flower of a specific plant? No, right? But it is one. It did come from multiple dimensions, but it became one. That is the effect, that is the essence of the Atma, or the Brahman. And that essence, that force is you, Shvetaketu, his father says, Tatvamasi. So you are that. As this is coming from different places, but still is one essence, and that's you. Then this person, like his son, like asks more questions. Can you give me more examples? What it is? The second thing which his dad talks about is this water, the rivers. There are rivers which flow towards different directions, a east river and a west river. At the end of the day, all the rivers go and merge into a sea, and the sea is into the ocean. When the water merges into a sea, can you separate the water from which river it came from? That's not possible. It actually merges in itself. Right? So we are merging ourselves into our own awareness. That's basically it. And then the same water goes up into the atmosphere, comes back as a rain. So the cycle continues. The same awareness goes up and comes back into multiple dimensions. And then again, it provides a life to the world. But the same force exists, but it cannot be separated. Then he asks more questions. And how come this force exists and what happens later, right? When something passes away. And he gives an example of a tree. So when you actually take a tree and chop on the top, there is a sap oozes out. Same thing if you cut it out in either places, the sap oozes out. This one, but the tree still is alive because it got the life force in it. And one branch wiggles because it is dead and it falls away, but the tree is still alive because the force is inside it. And the tree stays alive as long as the force is in it. And once the tree is like the force leaves, when just a small wind can blow the mighty tree down. Until then it was standing. But the life moves on. The tree is dead, but the life hasn't dead, right? The life moves on to the next. So that consciousness continuously goes on. Then he also asks, if that's the case, what is the shape of it? How does it look? Then he gives an example of a banyan tree. The banyan trees are these vast trees. In Asian countries, you would see them, right? The huge ones. It actually covers acres of land. And he asks him to go and get the fruit of this tree. So he gets the fruit of the tree. And then he says, open it. He opens it. And then he says, there is a seed in it. He looks at the seed. He says, break the seed. He breaks the seed. And he opens up. There's actually hollow. There's nothing in there. And he says, this particular seed can bring up this huge banyan tree. But there's nothing in there. It is subatomic, but there's nothing in there. So the same force which can actually bring up this tree, which can hold the acres, is basically kind of is inanimate, right? You cannot see there, but still that exists. So that's the kind of message he says. This exists, but you cannot see it very clearly. And then the last question he asks, how can I pursue this one? Is there any other way? Then he gives an example. He says, go bring a glass of water and put a little bit of salt in it. And he says, go to sleep now. We'll talk about it tomorrow morning. He wants to see the patience of that person, see whether he actually is waiting for an answer or he's just making something up. So he says, okay, fine, I'll go back. And morning he goes back to his dad, and dad says, okay, come here. Let's talk about it, what we talked about for the night. He says, go get that glass of water, you put the salt in there. He says, where is the salt? Can you show me the salt? He says, I can't see it. It's dissolved, right? It says, go taste the water. Taste the water from the top of the glass. He says, how is it? It says, salty. It says, go taste the water from the middle of the glass. How is it? Salty. The bottom of the glass, salty. So you can perceive the sense of the saltness, but you cannot see it. That's the idea here, Tattvamasi. That force is you. You cannot visualize it, but that force is you. So that is the force within all of us, right? So that's basically, it's not something that I'm saying. What all these texts say, right? And all these great sages experience these things as we always realize, right? When we're actually in the deep state of meditation, where we're actually going in ourselves, what happens in our dreamless state. And that's where we are actually resting in our own selves. When you actually see this resting in our own selves, as this boy discovered with his father's dialogue, we see the world in a very different way. We don't see a separation between us and them, none of that, right? Everything is the same and everybody is the same. And why we always cannot think about it? Because we are clouded by our thoughts and emotions and all of those things. Just having an awareness of these things is very, very profound in my experience. It changed my attitude towards things. I still need to work, I need to make money, all of that happens, but still, as I deal with problems, the attitude is different. So just this is something which I came up with, but it says, yes, still mind really leads to a discovery of the self and equanimity. The key word for me is the equanimity. When we look at everything as same, is very different. That means you are looking at ourselves as ourselves in everywhere. That results in unbridled happiness. The happiness which we get just by getting something or achieving something is very momentary. New thing comes up. But when you're actually seeing this equanimity and this profound sense of equalness, same force exists, or the Atma, Brahman exists across, you see something of this Sat Chitananda. Sat means the truth, Chit is the mind, and Ananda. So that's kind of the essence of all of these practices we do. And this is Aldous Huxley, the perception, right? There are things known and there are things unknown, and in between are the doors of perception. And when we look at things in a very different way, profound way, you really see the difference. It's very hard to kind of comprehend all these topics, but I think as you start thinking about it, you'll start realizing yourself. And that's it for this talk today. We talked 10 minutes. So if you have any questions, we're happy to take discussion. Anything is fine. Any questions? Anybody has any thoughts? It need not be a question. It could be an experience you want to share or a thought you want to share. Anybody has questions on Zoom or anything? Any thoughts?
I mean, if your question on Zoom, it's not going to come over in audio. I'll have to look at the chat.
Oh, I have it here.
Oh, you're going to?
Yeah. No chat.
No questions. Anyone want to share anything what we talked about? And I think I answered. Did I answer your question in this?
Yeah. Thank you.
I hope this was useful for all of you. And I mean, again, we are part of the management doing these things, but doing things in a more understanding way, right? Understanding doesn't mean like the physical understanding or anything like that. It's more of ourselves. So when we see that self, because I'll tell you one more story, which I kind of saw. There's one old Sanskrit movie I watched. There was a guy, it's in set in 13th century in India or 8th century. So one person is stealing something, right? He's stealing a coconut from a tree. So this person climbs up all the way to the coconut on the top. It is trying to steal. The owner of that particular field runs and says, "Don't steal." And what he does is he says, "You stay there," and he ties a turban right onto the tree and says, "You can't get down." The person doesn't get down. He could get down and run away, but he doesn't put any fence next to him. Nothing. He says, he puts a towel and says, "You can't get down." That guy obeys and stays there. He was stealing, right? So he could run away. He comes back. He comes back with actually food. He doesn't punish him. He saw him stealing. He comes back with the food, and he says, "Now you can come down." He removes the turban and he comes down and he gives him the food. There is a passerby. Three kids will be walking by, and they ask him, "Why did you do that? Right? You could have run away with your coconuts." And he says, "I believe in myself." he says, I believe in myself. So he has seen the same self in that particular person. He did not treat him as something different. He says, I believe in myself. That's what Tatvamasi teaches us. And when, I mean, the world is different, but that's one example which was probably kind of had a great influence on me when I was kind of preparing for the slides and I was looking at that movie, kind of understood, okay, why that person said that. And then he gives the food and he says, okay, eat the food, and now if you want more coconuts, take it. He gives them, and that person says, I'll never steal anymore. Right? You could have punished him, you could have reprimanded him, doing all of this, but that would have been react. So this one. So that's another thing which is very profound and very kind of touching, right, if you think about it.
On, not a question, but a comment on one of the slides you have there about raga and dvesha. Dvesha is something you hate and you get over it. Like you sit in meditation, you do yoga, whatever you do, or you think about it and you let it go. Raga is something you are attached to, and that is hard to let it go. You have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think the first thing is I understanding that raga is important. The realization that this is why I'm attached to this one. And the second thing is, in my perspective, thinking that a lot of things which we think are ours is temporary. We think everything is permanent, right? We live as if this is it, right? There's nothing tomorrow, and that's, I think, thinking that this is temporary will actually get rid of your raga, because things could change, but only thing which is permanent is our inner self, as this Upanishad kind of illustrates. The self, when we pass away, the body passes away, but the life stays. And really kind of thinking through that life, that inner self, is the only permanent. Everything else is temporary, removes our raga. I'm not saying we should all be sages, right? Going to the forest. No, none of that. You do your life and really kind of think through as a temporary lens, and we'll see a very different thing. But,
so how can you use this to, really counter, say, aggressions from others, or like, how do you make yourself stronger than your opposition? Like, when you're trying to achieve something really good, and then you have a lot of opposition, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? I think that's where again their raga and dvesha comes to play, right? They are attached to their promotion or their betterment or whatever it is. In my perspective, again, being a friend with your enemy, kind of a thing, right? So that's where the mudita, the joyness comes. When you actually go ahead and be with that person in a way, like where genuinely you are happy for that person, it's a human nature that they'll turn back and be friendly with us. I'll give you an example, which is very common sense thing, which we all do. When you go to an ice cream shop, they actually give you a sample. And it's actually scientifically proven that if you eat a sample, you're going to buy it, no matter what. We feel guilty. And it's a human nature, when we help others, there is a reciprocation. Very, very few, I would say maybe very, you're not see. Reciprocation is built into our DNA. And when somebody helps, we will help them. Or we might feel bad if you don't help, right? Still, we are not going to have enmity with them. In my view, I think having that kind of an thinking will definitely will get you more of a respectful leader, not a feared leader. And they will be with you. And there could be people who may not fall in that way, who are fully clogged in their minds. We can't help them. But generally, you actually give it a try, see whether. Any other question? Go ahead.
So I think you gave us a lot of information today. I feel like half the room is familiar with these terms and half of us are not. So just like, where do we start? Like, what is the one thing that we could do? I guess, what are you hoping that we would get out of this and change in our lives? And then how would we start that?
I think one thing which we do is equanimity, right? Again, like as a practices, if you haven't done yoga practice or anything, sitting there and breathing, observing your breath for a few minutes, that's enough. So when you actually get there, that would be the one thing which you start as a practice. And then treating the idea of oneness is important. And if you start having that idea of oneness, just think about like a oneness and breathing to slow down our thoughts would help to start off your journey towards that. That help?
What are we journeying towards and why?
What are we
journeying
towards? Yeah,
And-
and why?
and-
Yeah. So we are journeying towards the understanding of this concept called equanimity, right? That the self, the inner self which we have is the same across. There's no difference between you and me and everybody else. So the example that I was telling about this honeybees coming and then making the honey from different things. The consciousness exists across. It becomes one and it actually separates. Why we are doing it in a practical sense? It gives us much more clearer perspective towards the things. We are much more clearer. We don't have any baggage in our own heads when we start looking at it. When we start seeing everything in that lens, we don't hold anything, right, in our own perspectives, and we become this. I don't know, like we become this person whom people will love in a way. That's the basic. You'll see that, right? You will start seeing the difference. I'll give an example. Like when the small child smiles, everybody is like amazed because the kids don't have any baggage in their heads, nothing. Everybody loves, universal love, right? The child smiles, no matter who you are, you will like it. And same thing with a puppy, a dog. That's universal love, and that's where we want to be as a human being, and that's the journey. Yeah.
So would you say that the journey of inner self, because you gave the example of child smile of the dog, helps you find your authentic self? So it's not, this journey would help you be more authentic as a leader? Or finding your inner self and being aware would help you be an authentic leader?
You would be an authentic, empathetic leader, right? So you would, like when you empathize with somebody, they would be with you forever. So they would be with you forever, right? So that will happen to you. You can be an empathetic only when you actually try to understand and see the perspectives and not clogged by our own memories. That means understanding the self, ourself, because the self is the same across. The idea is, I understand you, myself, I'm understanding others in a very profound way. And that's a journey, a long-term journey, but we start somewhere, just simple breath, kind of understanding this one. We will become that leader. I mean, think about like the leaders of the world who has commanded the respect. Mahatma Gandhi or Dalai Lama, like all these people, nobody said, they are not asking to come and talk to them, right? The reverence happens. That reverence has to happen rather than being seeked. And when you want to get the reverence like that, you need, again, if you see their teachings or writings, they basically kind of embodied some of these qualities. Hope I answered your question.
No, yeah.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I have a question about resources. So I have my yoga practice, which is huge for me. It has changed me. I love it.
Mhm.
And I try to share as much of it with my team as possible because I understand how it can be good for them. But then like the resources are always a bit of a setback, right? Because nobody's going to go and take a teacher training, or just what you find to be called yoga is very different to what you find, like, I don't know, in an ashram or actually going into the philosophy. So I was wondering if you have any resources or places or methodologies that can be used for that to be like a more active tool for leading and just for everybody, I guess.
Yeah, great question. I mean, this is the difficulty now, is because it's such a big industry, right? So it is like easiest thing is to do the asanas, right? The exercises, because you don't need to think, you just act, right? With the physical body, it's easy to do, and that became the norm. And in terms of resources, unfortunately, like the Yoga Sutras is the best resource you have, but it's very few people can understand and like talk about it. So that makes me write a book. So thanks for letting me know. Yeah, but definitely, I think that's definitely a shortcoming we have right now. Is not a very, the sources are either to this extreme or that extreme, something in the middle. As I think, as you asked in the beginning, where to start on this journey is not very easily available.
There's art of living and
Right.
Yeah, there is a book, it's called Wings to Awakening, and it's instructive, but it also walks you through these practices.
Okay.
It takes you through your mental constructs, your thinking about thinking, and the whole systemic loop that takes you inner and inner into it.
Do you offer any meditation classes or anything outside Google?
So far, I don't. I teach at Google. I run some workshops between my day job and the Yogler job, but I do run that.
Maybe you should open something up for the lead. As a lead.
Maybe in the weekend, like
Yeah, that's a good idea.
a guided meditation class or something.
Yeah, absolutely fine. I mean, you can just on the lead workspace, just ping me. If there is interest, I'm happy to do that. Yeah.
Thank you, Satish, for presenting today's workshop.
Yeah.
Round of
Thank
applause.
you.